Deep in the woods, where the light barely penetrates the thick canopy of leaves, lies a path seldom traveled. The air is thick with mist, and the ground is littered with fallen leaves, creating an eerie silence that is only broken by the occasional rustle of unseen creatures. This is a place that holds secrets, dark and terrible secrets that have been hidden away from the world for far too long. That's where they found the bodies, over 50 of them, discarded, left to rot, each one a silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded in this forsaken place. The scene was a macabre tableau with bodies strewn about like discarded dolls, each one covered in a forensic sheet that did little to hide the brutality of their deaths. Each one a life extinguished, each one a story left untold. These were not just bodies, they were people with dreams, hopes, and loved ones who would never see them again. The extinguished candle and wilted flowers on a grave were poignant reminders of the lives that had been so cruelly snuffed out, each one a story left untold. The old abandoned diary with its yellowed pages and the broken picture frame on the ground spoke volumes about the lives that had been interrupted, the stories that would never be completed. These were not random acts of violence, they were deliberate, calculated, and executed with a chilling precision. But these were not random acts. This was the work of a monster, a man who moved through the shadows unseen and unheard, leaving a trail of death and despair in his wake. He was a predator, stalking his prey with a cold, calculating efficiency that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned investigators. This was the work of a monster. A man who tallied his victims like grim trophies. Each life he took was another notch on his belt, another trophy to add to his gruesome collection. His eyes, cold and devoid of any humanity, were the windows to a soul that had long since been consumed by darkness. A man who tallied his victims like grim trophies. The collection of old, worn-out objects on a shelf, the tally marks scratched into the wood, were all that remained of the lives he had taken. Each mark was a testament to his cruelty, a reminder of the countless souls he had sent to an early grave. The discovery sent chills down the spines of seasoned investigators. The sheer number of victims, the brutality of the murders, and the cold, calculated nature of the killer left them shaken to their core. This was not just another case, it was a nightmare come to life, a horror story that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The sheer number of victims, the brutality of the murders. Each grave marker was a stark reminder of the lives that had been lost, the families that had been torn apart, and the innocence that had been shattered. The aerial view of the multiple graves in the forest was a haunting sight, a visual representation of the evil that had been lurking in the shadows, the brutality of the murders. The blood-stained ground and the close-up of the knife with blood were chilling reminders of the violence that had been inflicted upon the victims. This was not just a crime scene, it was a slaughterhouse, a place where innocence had been brutally and mercilessly destroyed. This was a case that would haunt them. The haunted expressions on the faces of the investigators spoke volumes about the impact this case had on them. They had seen many horrors in their careers, but nothing could have prepared them for the sheer scale of the evil they had uncovered in these woods. A case that would become the stuff of nightmares. The foggy graveyard at night with the eerie full moon behind dark clouds was a fitting backdrop for the horror that had been uncovered. This was a case that would be remembered for years to come, a grim reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. Alexander Pichushkin, that was his name. He confessed to taking 49 lives, but he aspired for more. He had a goal, a macabre ambition, 64 murders. One for each square on a chessboard. He meticulously planned each kill. He saw himself as playing a deadly game, and the people he targeted, they were nothing more than pawns in his twisted game. Moscow, a sprawling metropolis, and at its heart, Bitsa Park, a place of tranquility and nature. But for the victims of Alexander Pichushkin, it became a hunting ground. He preyed on the vulnerable, the homeless, the alcoholics, people who would not be missed. Or so he thought. He lured them into the woods with promises of vodka and companionship. Then, he would strike. Pichushkin's weapon of choice, a hammer, brutal, efficient, he would use it to crush the skulls of his victims, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable horror. Why? When asked about his motives, Pichushkin's answer was chilling. He craved the feeling of power, the feeling of control. He said that killing gave him a sense of immortality, as if he was somehow cheating death itself. In 2007, Alexander Pichushkin stood trial for his crimes. The trial was one of the most sensational in recent history, drawing attention from media outlets around the world. Pichushkin, often referred to as the Chessboard Killer, was accused of a series of brutal murders that shocked the nation. His methodical approach and chilling demeanor left an indelible mark on all who followed the case. The courtroom was filled with a palpable tension. Every seat was occupied and the air was thick with anticipation. Journalists, family members of the victims, and curious onlookers all gathered to witness the proceedings. The whispers and murmurs of the audience created an almost unbearable atmosphere as everyone waited to hear the details of Pichushkin's heinous acts. The weight of his crimes hung heavy in the air. The faces of those present reflected a range of emotions: grief, anger, disbelief. Each testimony, each piece of evidence presented added to the collective sorrow and outrage. The sheer scale of his actions was almost incomprehensible, leaving many to wonder how one person could commit such atrocities. But Pichushkin showed no remorse, no regret. His face remained emotionless, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil surrounding him. It was as if he was completely detached from the gravity of his actions, further unsettling those who observed him. He seemed to relish in the attention. The media frenzy that accompanied his trial seemed to fuel his ego. He appeared to enjoy the spotlight, often smirking and making eye contact with the cameras. It was a chilling display of his narcissism and lack of empathy. He smiled for the cameras. Each flash of the camera seemed to embolden him, as if he were a celebrity rather than a criminal on trial for unspeakable crimes. His demeanor was unsettling, to say the least, and it left a lasting impression on all who witnessed it. He boasted about his crimes. With a chilling confidence, Pichushkin recounted his actions, almost as if he were proud of them. His lack of remorse and his willingness to speak so openly about his deeds were deeply disturbing. It was clear that he derived some twisted sense of satisfaction from recounting his horrific acts. He even corrected the official body count, claiming he had killed more than they knew. This revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom, adding another layer of horror to an already gruesome case. His audacity in challenging the official records was a testament to his twisted sense of pride and his desire to be recognized for his crimes. His lack of empathy was bone-chilling. The cold, emotionless stare he maintained throughout the trial was a stark reminder of the darkness that resided within him. It was a look that would haunt those who saw it for years to come, a chilling testament to the depths of his twisted mind. The evidence against Pichushkin was overwhelming: DNA evidence, eyewitness accounts, and his own chilling confession. The jury deliberated for just a few hours before returning with a verdict: guilty. The judge sentenced Pichushkin to life in prison, no possibility of parole. He would spend the rest of his days locked away. His reign of terror was finally over. Justice had been served. But for the families of the victims, there would be no closure. No amount of punishment could bring back their loved ones. The scars of Pichushkin's crimes would remain. The case of the Chessboard Killer shook Russia to its core. It forced people to confront the darkness that can lurk in the shadows, and it left a lingering sense of unease. What drove Alexander Pichushkin to commit such horrific acts? Was it a twisted sense of power, a desire for notoriety, or was it something even darker, something buried deep within his psyche? These questions have haunted investigators, psychologists, and the public alike. To understand the mind of a monster, we must delve into the depths of human nature and the complexities of the human brain. Alexander Pichushkin, also known as the Chessboard Killer, left a trail of devastation and fear. His fascination with chess was not just a hobby but a metaphor for his life. Each victim was a piece on his board, a move in his twisted game. Was this a manifestation of his need for control, or was it a deeper, more sinister compulsion? The eerie solitude of his existence, the dark thoughts that plagued his mind, and the uncontrollable urge to dominate and destroy, these were the elements that defined Pichushkin's life. His actions were not just crimes, they were expressions of a deeply disturbed psyche. But what could have caused such a profound deviation from normal human behavior? Experts have debated his motives. Some argue that his actions were driven by a need for control, a desire to assert dominance over his victims. Others believe that he was a psychopath, incapable of feeling empathy or remorse. The debate continues with no clear consensus in sight. What is clear, however, is that Pichushkin's mind was a labyrinth of dark thoughts and dangerous impulses. Some believe he was driven by a need for control. This need manifested in his obsession with chess, where each move was calculated, each piece a representation of his victims. The meticulous planning and execution of his crimes suggest a mind that thrived on order and precision, yet was consumed by chaos and violence. Others believe he was a psychopath, incapable of feeling empathy. This lack of emotional connection to his victims allowed him to commit his heinous acts without remorse. His cold, emotionless demeanor was a stark contrast to the brutality of his actions, painting a chilling picture of a man devoid of humanity. Whatever the reason, the case of Alexander Pichushkin serves as a chilling reminder of the capacity for evil that exists within humanity. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that monsters are not born, they are made. And in understanding them, we come face to face with the darkest parts of ourselves. The Chessboard Killer. A name that will forever be etched in the annals of criminal history. His crimes left an indelible mark on the city of Moscow, and his legacy continues to haunt the memories of those who lived through that terrifying time. We can only hope that such horrors will never be repeated, but as long as darkness exists in the human heart, there will always be the potential for evil to surface.